Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. My guest offers over 25 years of global experience in helping individuals and organizations thrive. She's delivered transformative leadership programs across 5 continents, which is in 22 countries, combining her expertise in neuroscience with a passion for building management and leadership capabilities. As the founder of Leadership Recipe LLC, she designs impactful programs that enhance communication, emotional intelligence, and team performance. Her global perspective, shaped by living in Australia, which you'll get the Australian twang, beautiful accent, Hong Kong, and now the USA. Drawn on her leadership roles at major organizations like Deloitte, Amazon, and Jupiter Networks. And I've never heard of Jupiter Networks, so I checked it out, and they're doing 10 billion, and there's something like 11,000 employees. So it's impressive stuff. So when you kind of got experience from that, it's very good. This diverse background fuels her fresh, practical approach to leadership development. In her debut book, which has been, I believe, released today, so congratulations, first of all, it's Game On. Is management your best career player? She empowers readers to make informed decisions about stepping into management. Please welcome Joanne Merrick.
Yay, thank you. Great to be here. And yes, there's the Aussie twang. I can really put it on if I need to.
Yeah, no problem. And I mean, I just want to let the people know, because there's people that are listening on Spotify, and the videos on Spotify, it's on BitChute, YouTube, and Rumble. So if you're watching, you can just scan the QR code. That's Find My Six Podcast and all about my coaching and stuff like that. Or go to roycollin.com. And if you're looking for a virtual assistant, go to va.world. Sorry to interrupt, but I forgot to do that at the start.
No, I love it. I love the fact that you brought on my Aussie accent, right? Because I usually do at the beginning of any program or, anything I'm doing that's being especially recorded, because if I don't say, yes, I'm from Australia and that's my accent, because I don't hear the accent, of course, then people are kind of wondering what's that accent, and then while they're wondering, what's that accent, they're not listening to anything I'm saying. So I like to get that just straight from the start. So thank you very much for having me.
No problem at all. No problem. So I want to just kind of learn about moving around first, because I mean, most people kind of know at this stage that I'm Irish and I'm 18 years in Poland. And I learned a lot because I just assumed everybody was the same and people think the same and everything. It's a kind of, I don't know, a rude awakening. And I'm just curious for you, when you've lived in a few countries, how it was for you, and what things that you kind of expected but were totally different.
Oh, what a great question. So I think the biggest move for me was actually from Hong Kong to the US, and you would think that would be a lot simpler than Australia to Hong Kong. But the move here was a little bit more challenging, I think, because just culturally, yes, I've got like an English background, etc. I speak the same language, but culturally, I found the US to be very different from what I was experiencing in Australia. So, I was also very different from living in Hong Kong, which is a very collectivist kind of society or community where everyone's kind of including everyone in everything, especially newcomers like I was myself from Australia to Hong Kong. And I find the US culture a little bit kind of more individualistic. So I guess that's where the biggest challenge was there. But I think the biggest lesson I learned was that communication is not necessarily communication. You think you're communicating, and you learn very quickly that maybe the message that you're trying to get across is not necessarily the one that you hoped for, or the impact that you were having or wanted to have. The intent behind your impact was not necessarily what you intended. So you need to do a little bit more work on the communication side of things to make sure that your message is getting across. The one thing I loved about living in different places is the opportunity to build really strong relationships with people in those countries, especially Hong Kong. Hong Kong is very near and dear to my heart. And I was only there 3.5 years, but the relationships that I built there have lasted a lifetime. So
The thing we noticed at the start is like in Ireland, driving courtesy is like if you have a slip road, nearly every second car lets you out. And when I came here first, you had to be a kamikaze to get out. It was like nobody was letting you out. But it's changed. It's like over the years now, I see, and I heard that like a lot because they went to Germany, Poland, or to UK, Norway, when they go there, they kind of understand what's the culture there. Like Norway, the same thing. Like every single person will stop at a pedestrian crossing, and it's side street, same thing that you. But it's getting better. So that there were things that, and same thing with like the humor as well. Like I mean, used in Ireland, everyone's just laughing and taking the piss out of each other, and here there was like you kind of had to explain yourself. They didn't get it, and you had to kind of, and that's kind of hard to take. When you're used to a certain system like that, you just assume, everyone gets your humor, and they don't.
And they don't, especially in the classroom, you have to be really careful. And I had to be really careful, especially working in Asia too. I needed to finish each of my sentences. I couldn't let each of my words kind of run together like they do in Australia. And I'm trying to demonstrate the difference there. But yes, I needed to enunciate so much better because I was communicating with people who spoke a lot more languages than I did because I only speak English. But I wanted to come across to them as clearly as I possibly could, and to enunciate and finish my sentences, and each word in my sentence I found kind of was really helpful too.
But I'm not going to kind of delve into the speaking. I want to talk about what you're doing in the book, but I'm very curious because I've heard a few people kind of different stories when they're speaking in different countries, and it's kind of similar. Like you just expect, this is how it be, and you learn a lot. Is usually kind of afterwards, and you don't repeat the mistakes. I'm just curious. I mean, like 22 countries, 5 continents. You've obviously you've done a lot of speaking. So was there things that you kind of went, "Ooh, I wish I had known that." Something that happened from different countries?
I think maybe living and working in Asia Pac, because before I moved to Hong Kong, I'd obviously done a lot of work there. I traveled there a lot from Australia, and had done work in Thailand and Japan and other places. I think one of the biggest faux pas, if that's what you're asking, that I made was probably in Japan. I have my background in Australia, I guess, is very plain food, and I don't eat a lot of seafood. So the Japanese team were, of course, being very accommodating and wanted to create a lovely opportunity for the facilitators that were there to run the training for their teams. So they brought in this wonderful lunch of immaculate seafood and beautiful sandwiches and all this kind of thing, but there wasn't anything in it that I could eat. I was kind of just like a much more of a plain eater kind of person. So I think I said something along the lines of, "Oh, I can't eat this," and then my colleague said to me, "Why can't you eat it?" And I said, "Because it will make me sick." And then I was like mortified that I had actually said that, and in the true kind of accommodating custom that I grew to experience there. The next day, I think I just had a chicken and salad sandwich or something delivered to me for lunch, so they were just completely accommodating, but I had just completely offended them. And it was just coming from, a place of really not knowing what I should have said under those circumstances.
With
So,
the companies that I mentioned at the start, I mean, they're all big companies. So maybe kind of take us through your career and what you were doing, and then we delve further into kind of management.
yeah, I think I was always interested in psychology. So I actually left school at the age of 17 and went and worked in a law firm as a junior in the law firm, and worked my kind of way up to being a secretary, as we called it in those days. I guess today it's more of an executive assistant kind of role. And I enjoyed that. But there was at some point throughout my career, I remember just sitting across from one of the lawyers and, take this for what it's worth. I think I said to myself something along the lines of, "You know what? I think I'm as smart as you." I'd always kind of put myself down like I wasn't smart enough or wasn't good enough. And I decided at that point to go back to what was high school, I guess, part-time in Victoria and get my year 12, which is what you need in order to get into college in Australia. So I finished my year 12 over a 2-year period, and then got into a Bachelor of Arts degree. And I started to do that part-time as well, all while working full-time. And finally graduated, I'm not kidding, Roy, 13 years later with a behavioral science degree. So that's resilience. I think that's kind of really what's been driving a lot of I guess my career. But having that degree got me a role at Deloitte. So I started there looking after training and development, and eventually got into facilitating programs myself. From Deloitte, I then got an offer literally from someone I knew who was working at Deloitte. They were doing a HR transformation piece of work for Deloitte here in San Francisco. And as part of that transformation exercise, they determined that they needed a head of learning and development at Juniper Networks, based in Asia somewhere. I could have lived in Hong Kong, I could have lived in Singapore. So I chose, went through the interview process, got the job, and then, uprooted my life and put my apartment on lease and moved to Hong Kong, and just kind of took that risk. And yeah, 3.5 years later, that same company asked if I would relocate here to the United States. So fortunately, they relocated me here. So I was with Juniper for about 7 years. From there, I was always looking upwards. I was always looking for other opportunities. I wanted a head of something title. I was very title oriented in those days. And I went to Amazon Devices, or Lab 126 as it was there, and took on that role. So I was with them for about 4 years as well, grew the team, and then had another opportunity come about at Omnicell, where I was head of organizational development for them. So really kind of brought in the performance management side of things, not just the learning and development. And from there went to another company's head of organizational development, The Sixth Sense. And from there, I founded my own business, The Leadership Recipe, and I've been doing that for nearly about 1.5 years, nearly 2 years. But an important part of that has obviously been writing the book, which I've always wanted to do. So, which, as you said, dropped yesterday. So I'm very excited about that.
And, you kind of said, oh, it took you 13 years for the thing. But I think it's a better way to do it, because the amount of people, even here, like I was taking on people sometimes, they had like a master's degree. They couldn't turn on a fax machine or something, like they couldn't do it. And you're going, what are you learning? Like, you're teaching them everything. Whereas when you're working, you're not just shooting the breeze and just taking, this is a DOS, because most people, they don't even turn up and they don't care. And if they have a good memory, they can pass the exams and that's enough. Whereas when you're working, you actually see the benefit of certain things that you're studying. Like I was young when I done construction economics and management. I was 17, turning on 18. And like, I couldn't get a job afterwards, but when I did, I just kept studying. I kept doing courses. I got another diploma in project management and everything, and I really enjoyed doing that and studying. But it was shocking for me, the amount of people with different qualifications that hadn't a clue. And I know we're going to go into the management. What I've learned is, I look at their career, have they been working? And I know they're going to be better. And even from a younger age as well, what have they been doing? Have they been mealing? Because they're workers, as opposed to academics, because a lot of them, they go away, they do the masters, and then they do the PhD, and then they want to go back into college. So it's like, that's their profession, is to stay in the university. And I think, a lot of people should have a look at their career path, to kind of study at the weekend or at night. I know it's a lot at the thing, but I think, because when you finish, you're way ahead. Because I think that's why you got really good positions, because you have so much work experience as opposed to the person coming out. It might be even a few years, but they're done at the end, and then they have to build up, and there's competition. So people should reevaluate the education system and how they look at it.
I think that's true too, and be careful what you listen to what people say, but then do what you want to do. I think that's important. I remember when I first started my degree, I was working at a law firm, as I mentioned, and I went out for lunch with a colleague, And I said, "Oh, I've just started this degree. I'm really excited." She said, "Oh, what's that involve?" And I said, "Oh, well, I've got 9 hours of lectures a week, and I work my weekends and study and all that kind of stuff." And she said, "How long is it going to take you?" And at that point, I thought it would take me about 8 years. She said, 8 years? Why would you bother? That was her response. And, it took me a heck of a lot longer than that because I changed degrees. I changed from a BA to a behavioral science degree, but it was worth it, and I think it's the definition of resilience. You don't kind of sit down watching TV every night. You get home from work. I was married at the time, my stepson, whatever. You do what you've got to do from a family perspective, and then, you just kind of roll up your sleeves and you get it done. And I tried lots of study strategies. I mean, I would do that at nighttime, and other times I would wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and study for 2 hours, and then get ready to go off to work, go to college or university that night, and get home about 9 o'clock, and get up and do it all over again. I tried many different ways, but I always gave myself a day off, and that day off was Saturday, so that I could spend me time, family time, whatever I needed to do. But Sundays was my study day, and I think family and friends at the time probably paid a little bit of the price, no doubt. But because I didn't get to spend as much time with them as I would have liked to. But at the end of the day, it's, definitely paid off for me. You've got to play the long game, Roy. I think it's the long game that we're talking about here.
And
Yeah.
I think not just for like self-employed people, but people working in corporations as well having a day off. Because sometimes people are just constantly communicating and they don't get to switch off. There's some people, at 4 o'clock they clock out and that's it. Nobody goes near them. But if you're in a management role, you just constantly, even when you're on holidays, I remember, like, I work for a mechanical contracting company. I was a contracts manager. And at one stage I went on holiday for 2 weeks and they had to get me back as it. Nobody else could do it.
That's right.
And I made them pay for that, but it was like,
Good for you.
and I was like, it was a horrible feeling thinking that they're just reaching out to you when they feel like it without so it's not a holiday. And I suppose let's start on that because, I mean, you've obviously seen that. And so there's no kind of respect for the person that, like, the way I've seen it a lot, especially in Ireland more, like, it was like people work on an hourly rate. But then, so they weren't the ones that were actually kind of contact or whatever. But when they give you a position and you're on X amount per year, it's like you're ours now, and we can contact you when you want and send the email and all this. And I mean, that needs to be changed because that seems to be accepted. But to me, it's like, no, that's not okay.
You can feel a little bit taken for granted, maybe.
Yeah.
Not really valued. I think people need to look, especially like managers with their direct reports, and I know we're going to get there, but to look at your direct report as whole people. Every manager that I had while I was studying and family and, working and all that kind of thing knew exactly what was going on in my life because I had a relationship with them where I could say, "Hey, I've got an exam coming up in a couple of weeks. I might need to take a week's vacation." And they're like, "You're going to take your vacation to study for an exam?" And I was like, "Yeah, because I've been working and I've been traveling and I've been, doing what I need to do. But I need that time to study for my upcoming exam." So to have a relationship with your manager where you feel open enough to have that kind of real, genuine, authentic conversation so that you can both communicate where you're actually coming from. And I worry that a lot of the conversations that are going on out there between managers and their direct reports are either kind of superficial, or direct reports are not feeling as comfortable as they could to have those open conversations with their managers. So, works both ways.
And this is one that everybody's got a different opinion, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Sometimes people, they keep the distance with the people that they're managing, and others, they become their friends.
Yeah.
Is it just by individual? Because what happens is sometimes you obviously prefer some people, but then the others get jealous and they think, and they feel they're being left out. How do you navigate that?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's the je sais quoi to some degree of being a great manager, but it's definitely possible to have an open, authentic, real relationship with your direct reports without stepping over into kind of the friendship realm. Because when you feel, you want to be friendly, but there has to be that kind of natural respect of boundaries, um, where you at the end of the day you need to get the work done, and your manager needs to manage the performance of you getting your work done, and work with you to enable you to thrive and get everything done, and be the person that you want to be and deliver the results that you want to deliver. So it's definitely a balance, but the minute you find yourself kind of going like over into the friendship realm, warning signs should probably come up, because it's really hard to be that kind of a friend when you're actually managing someone's performance. This is one of the challenges that individual contributors face when they move into a manager role, because who is going to potentially be your future direct reports as a manager is your previous peers that you were potentially friends with. So you still need to be friendly, but the relationship balance and the boundaries that are associated there need to be managed, and managers need to be really cognizant of the impact that they're having in that way.
A lot of companies, they don't really train the person to be the manager. Like what I've seen, like even in the mechanical kind of side of things, if there was a fitter, a plumber that was really good, you should keep him where he's very good at. But that was their way. Then they'd start taking somebody out, and then he'd be like a charge hand managing four people, and eventually a foreman overseeing a job. And not everybody wanted it, and not everybody was good at it. They could have been the best tradespeople, and it's the exact same in the corporation. They do the same thing. They take out maybe the IT guy because he's brilliant, and they just assume, okay, you deserve to be the manager. And one, maybe they don't even have the conversation thinking he wants it. But two, they rarely train him to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing and how to be good at their next role.
It's so true, and it's such a concern out there in many organizations. I believe I've heard horrifying statistics along the lines of like 75% of managers out there are not formally trained in their role. And as I write about in the book, it's kind of like you would not have a plumber in your house looking after, you know, whatever they need to look after, if you didn't think that they had some qualification. You wouldn't allow an electrician in your home. You wouldn't go and see a doctor. If you didn't think that there was some form of formal qualification associated with it. But out of the literally millions of managers out there, particularly in the US, no doubt, obviously more broadly across the world, many of them don't have any formal qualifications. And I heard other horrifying kind of statistics along the lines of managers typically become managers around the age of 30, depending on, their own, career growth. But most of them do not attend any training until they're in their early 40s. So they're performing this role of a manager for over a decade
Just winging
without just winging it, because, wow, I can have a conversation. I can, give someone some feedback. I can do all of these things that I've seen other managers that I've worked for do, but maybe take it a little bit for granted that it's not maybe as easy as what they thought it was. So that's the whole premise behind, why I wrote the book, is I wanted to provide a resource for individual contributors to kind of say, hey, what is the role of a manager? It's not the book is not the how, because that would be 10 books. It's the what. It's like, let's break this role down into fundamentally what the role is, to see if I'm actually interested in it. Because my whole premise in career growth is do what you love and love what you do. And I truly believe in that. There's no work-life balance anymore. It's just life. And work is an important element to that, as is, family, friendships, and health, and all of those sorts of things. So I've been training managers for like 25 years, and I haven't seen that much change in manager growth or development. I'm still seeing these horrible statistics. So I thought, how can I get in front of that? I know I'll write a book. that will help people make the decision. Let's make a conscious decision to become managers. Let's not do the typical trust fall that happens, in most situations in organizations where it's like, hey, Roy, you're a great individual contributor. You get on really well with your team. Let's have you manage them. And Roy's like, what? Oh, okay, great. I get a promotion. I get more money. I get, a little bit more esteem. But then maybe get into the role and think, wow, this is really not all it's cracked up to be. And I think I need a lot more training than I've currently got. And how do I get that? So that's where I hope the book will make a difference, but it's also where there's an element of fear associated with what might really be going on out there.
I remember when I don't know, was I 24 when I was running the first kind of job. And for me, it was strange because it was like the foreman would be under me and engineers, but like the foreman was like, I don't know, maybe close to 60, and it was strange for me because you're normally kind of grow up, respecting the elders, and the elders are kind of telling you what to do. But it worked out well. But I know at the start it was kind of like, it's just people kind of trying to put their power and see can they do things which in control. And like I'm not like that. I don't let anybody do that. And then it just worked out because he could see I was hardworking and he was the same, and we just ended up blending. But I remember thinking, this is strange. I've got a guy that's that age, and I'm so young, and he's reporting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. The dynamic is not as you might have imagined it. And I think there's a lot of situations out there where, like I've worked for people that were younger than me. And I think it's about appreciating the differences, right? It's appreciating what they bring to the table, continually being curious around what you can learn from them under any given circumstance, being observant, listen with your eyes, what's really going on here? What am I noticing? And then being curious around what they've done and how they've and how they've gone about doing it, and just take all of that learning in like a sponge.
And like I always got on very well, and the people that were kind of engineers and stuff, they ended up kind of running jobs and getting very high positions and everything. Because I was always trying to do courses and things with that. But I found between even forming them at one stage, there was a lot of people that were under me. But I found, and I know other people have this, that you feel like you're an agony aunt at sometimes because when somebody's not in form and you're trying to find out whether it's relationship problems, health problems, or what, there's always something going on. And I was always trying to help them with the thing. But then at some stage, I felt it's like I'm taking my eye off the ball to be holding everyone's hand.
That's right.
So it's a catch-22 because I want to look after them. But then you can't be looking after them and spending so much time with each person and then getting your own stuff done.
That's right. And getting your own stuff done is kind of a really interesting element to it, because I think a lot of managers don't purely manage. In fact, I would hazard a guess that most managers don't purely manage. Managers they've got to manage their team and get their own personal results or complete their own personal projects or, whatever else they might have on their plate. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that happens that managers do, like the talent management element of things, the performance management element, the employee relations component of things that obviously their direct reports don't and really shouldn't see, because that's really it's got nothing to do with the direct reports role per se, and everything to do with what the manager has on their plates. So it's an interesting dynamic that managers can really find themselves in, and it's really easy to, if you don't know what you're doing or are not properly trained, to kind of go down a really bad spiraling path where you find you end up at the end of it, you're like, wow, how did I get here? But it can be a really rewarding, fun, engaging, exciting role as well for someone that wants to step into the management realm. I just feel that it's a little bit underestimated, and probably the fact that we have a lot of bad managers out there, if I can say that, or I talk about them in the book as horrible bosses. I know there's been movies about that, right? That we do whatever we can to help them as well, or prevent them, probably, because I don't think that people are intentionally horrible bosses. No one gets up in the morning going, I'm just going to create the worst working environment today. I'm going to give my direct reports all the negative feedback I can. I'm going to make them feel disengaged. I'm going to be disengaged. Like, people just don't get up in the morning thinking that, but often they can find themselves in those kinds of situations that they need a little bit more help than maybe they're able to, or willing to ask for.
Because I mean, like, you've got the managers that are reporting, but then sometimes you have a layer of managers that then report to somebody else. And there's always somebody that sees this guy is not competent. This guy is just ruining everything we're doing. And so it could be employees looking at their first level, or even the managers seeing the next level. And it's a hard one to navigate, because when you try to change it, they're trying to get rid of you straight away. I don't know if you cover that, and that could be one that could have 10 books as well. But I just, because everyone, like, I talk to, I have a lot of friends there, and most of the people in corporations, they hate their job. They hate the people that's managing them. So there's a lot of people that are dissatisfied in the way that it's run.
Totally. And, I can share an experience with you too, Roy. I remember one of my managers, I won't say which organization, obviously, but they went on sabbatical. So for a period of time, I was reporting to their boss. And this person was quite high up in the organization. And I had a one-on-one with this person, actually over breakfast. And the first words out of her mouth, so this is my boss, my boss who'd gone on a sabbatical, her boss who I was reporting to for a period of time. The first thing she turned to me and said was, I've got to be honest with you, Joanne, I have no idea what you do. I have no idea what your job is. And I thought, what? Like, what has my manager been talking to you about? Because part of a manager's role is advocating for your team and letting their boss know what their team is achieving and how they're achieving it, and getting that ongoing support so that it goes up the chain. So needless to say, I wasn't at that company for much longer, to be honest, because I thought, if I don't have the support of my manager in communicating what I'm doing, well then, I'll go somewhere else where I feel like I'm, really adding some value or making a difference. But that person in many respects was a great manager, but that was just a small area that really significantly impacted my relationship with them. So much so that I thought, I don't want to work with them anymore. And maybe this is what managers don't realize too, is that their direct reports have choices. You can leave and go and find another manager. In fact, I know there's the old adage out there, right, that people leave managers, not companies. I think that is true to some degree. I don't think it is 100% true, but I think that there's a lot to be said for that. And I wonder if companies actually realize how important the role of the manager is in terms of their own productivity and their own success, because fundamentally they've got this group of individuals, a small group of individuals, that are having a significant impact on every single one of their direct reports. And if every single one of their direct reports is not feeling great and good and loving their job and enjoying all the experiences that they are having, then that company could have problems.
Like, I worked for 2 companies in Ireland, and when I left one, I was more pushed out because and I'll touch on that in a minute, what they done, because I know a lot of people kind of experienced this. But when I left, I took the best people went with the other company with me, and the ones that didn't, that I couldn't find something, they went away to different companies because they saw what I was dealing with. And it's kind of, and I've seen that happen. And basically, when I was running these projects, there's one project I made it over $1 million on a £4 million project, or £5 million extra. Like, so I was watching all the pennies and everything. And the guy I was reporting to from the start, who hired me, was a director, lovely guy, got on very well with him. He just let me do my own thing. He was one of these guys, kind of, he taught me how to do it, the first job and all that. And then just kind of said, you're grand. He come down for the meetings, because I didn't like public speaking at the time. I overcame that fear, but he'd come down for the meetings. So he knew what I didn't like, and he was really supportive and paid me well, gave me good bonuses and everything. And I remember being at a meeting with I used to go up to the head office with the whole board, and there was like the managing director. And one time we were in for a meeting, and this director was talking to him, and he just put up his hand like that, as if to shut up. And I remember thinking, well, I wouldn't like if you did that to me. That's not nice. Like, that's disrespecting. And the guy that he did it to was really hardworking. He was like totally committed to the company. So later they got rid of him. And other directors were kind of promising, "Oh, we'll look after you way better and everything." And it was terrible because I was running at this stage a couple of, like, one job was 10 million euro, and there was a few other jobs that I was running, and they gave me all terrible people. And I know who's good. And immediately I said, I don't want this quantity surveyor. I don't want this foreman. And they wouldn't do it. And then I was catching them putting jobs on. And I know, like, when I talk about that to other people, there's so many people go through things like that. And it's a difficult situation because you can't punch upwards because, like, they can just say goodbye. And that's what happened in the end. It was like, they kind of pushed me out, like, and my heart was gone. There was a case where I was really passionate, loved what I was doing, this isn't right. But the amount of people that I hear that the exact same thing happens is massive.
Yeah. No, I think it's true. With the managers, the relationships that we have with managers above us, and managers with the relationships that obviously that they have with their direct reports is super cool. But what you were talking about for me is like creating followership, because there are managers out there that do that, and it might be a little bit cliche, but we all we know at an intrinsic level who we really like working with and for, because they bring out the best in us. And if if managers are not bringing out the best in their people, then that kind of starts that query in people's minds around, is this really the type of person or the person that I want to be working with? And this is why the role of true leaders within an organization is so important in terms of how they're coming across to their team. Like, many companies, the executive level kind of hide. You never see them. They're never out amongst their people. There's the old adage of, managing by walking around. Especially in this virtual world right now, it becomes even more challenging to create relationships with people higher up in the organization. But my opinion is, the higher up you go, the more you need to reach out, the more real you need to be, the more authentic, the more curious, the more interested you need to be in the people that are working within your organization. Because at the end of the day, just walking past someone's desk or a quick email or whatever can make the world of difference to anyone, within the organization. People notice behaviors. Employees, individual contributors, whatever, are constantly looking at the behaviors of leaders or their managers within the organization. I make the reference in the book to, welcome to management, welcome to becoming dinner time conversation, because who doesn't go home and talk about their manager to their significant others over, an evening drink or meal or, whatever. You've got to be aware of that as you're stepping into the management role, that your role is much more about other people now than it is about you. As an individual contributor, everything is about you. But as a manager, it's not about you anymore. It's about you getting done what you need to get done and you looking after the people that you're working with.
That usually comes out at the Christmas party when they allow the spouses to come along, because they're going home and they're bitching about what's going on. And when there's a few drinks thrown, they go up and go, "Why are you doing?" It's sometimes the Christmas parties can be interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if I haven't had a work Christmas party in years. Maybe that's why. I don't know if people do that anymore.
I mean, it was common when I was, but that's going back to the 90s, like, so, yeah.
No, right. But yeah, it's like, like a spouse might say, "Oh, so you're so and so," and if they're talking about you, it's like, "Oh my gosh, what has that person said about me?" Scary. Finally, I get a name to the face, kind of thing. But, it's true. And, maybe people need to be a little bit more aware, particularly managers, of the impact that they are having on others. And there's a huge gap in some respects between intent and impact. What I intend to say or how I intend to say something or the message that I intend to get across, if it doesn't get across that way, the impact that I intended to have doesn't actually happen, then there's a breakdown in communication. And I write about it in the book that impact is everything. What are we in life if not the impact we have on other people? And managers have an incredible opportunity to have a fantastic impact, not only on their own lives, but obviously on the lives of the people that they work with and particularly their direct reports. But they can also do the exact opposite, which is what we've been talking about.
And, sometimes they'll do training or a connection kind of, going bowling and differently. And a lot of the times they'll say, all right, go away and do this. And instead of being involved in it themselves or even going in the training, because it's a good way to bond and connect. But I've seen that a lot of the time the manager thinks that, yeah, I put the people there, they'll start connecting and the team will grow better. But they don't go themselves. And it's like, what's going on here? So, yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts on that? That they should be kind of
they need to, they need to get involved appropriately. So actually one of my leaders from Juniper, when I was there, it kind of gave me the visual of, you're managing a team. And I know a lot of people listening to this, auditorily, but, so you're managing a team. And then if you need to dive in to the nitty gritty, the detail, or whatever's going on to solve a problem or help solve a problem or be a voice in the room or whatever it is you need to be, that's fine. You can delve into the nitty gritty, but you need to make sure as a manager that you come back up and, you continue on doing what you're doing or managing the team, whatever. So there is a need to have, to be able to dive into the detail when you need to, but also step away from the detail and let your team look after the situation or circumstance. I think, being available is obviously really important as a manager, but not being a micromanager is just one of the worst things that managers can do. And there's so many micromanagers out there, and I'm, from my own experience as well. So it's about trust. It's about, delegating appropriately. It's about being available, stepping in when you need to, stepping out when you need to, and just letting things get done the way that they need to get done. I mentioned my postgraduate is in neuroscience, and I remember one of the triggers of like a threat or reward state in the brain is a feeling of autonomy. So you feel great when you've got autonomy. When you don't have autonomy, you don't. And that's where this micromanaging element kind of falls in. So on one of my lectures, which, the old adage, I remember I was running some training in Tokyo. I was up at 2:00 in the morning doing a UK lecture, right, which was, from Middlesex University where I was doing my postgrad. And a gentleman who was also doing the same lecture shared an experience where he went home the previous night to his family after work, and he walked into the front door, saw his son playing on the stairs, and his son was like 4 or 5. Went back to the kitchen, was helping his wife with the preparing of the evening meal. Came to time to eat, and he called out to his son, "Okay, it's time to eat dinner at the dinner table." And his son said, "I'm not eating dinner at the dinner table tonight, Dad. I'm going to eat dinner here on the stairs." So this guy had been learning about the impact of autonomy on the brain. So he thought, okay, I'm not going to tell my son to get to the dinner table. I can set that expectation that dinner must be eaten at the dinner table. But let me think of how I might change the situation so that my son wants to come to the dinner table. So what he did was he said, okay, let's set expectations. You must eat dinner at the dinner table, but I tell you what, tonight you can choose where you sit at the dinner table. So the son was interested. Why? Because he had a sense of autonomy, a sense of choice or control over this simple situation. But this guy doubled down then and said, not only can you choose where you sit at the dinner table, you can choose where mum and dad sit at the dinner table. Well, that kid was at that dinner table so quickly. Why? Because he had some control. He had a choice. And I like that example because I think it shows that how things get done sometimes doesn't matter. It's the fact that they need to get done that matters. And how can you create a situation or a circumstance where people want to do it? And even something as simple as getting a child to the dinner table, I think that there's a lot of opportunities where managers can be a little bit more creative in the way that they get things done with their teams that does provide this sense of autonomy and feeling good about themselves and feeling valued and feeling like they have a little bit more choice and control over what's going on in their world.
The language as well, because a lot of the times the manager is just kind of picking on everything that's negative. Instead of every time something is good, but people don't hear that, hence why the relationships break down, hence why people then Sunday night they're thinking, oh God, I have another week of this life. And all it takes is when
The
something
Sunday night blues.
yeah, or no, if somebody does an extra or kind of helps out when something's needed, just thank them and appreciate them. But very few do, and I think it's just the words that people use is the difference. They might, as you said, I don't think anyone kind of decides. Well, there's a few psychopaths out there. They just like power.
Yeah.
I mean, without a doubt, there is people like that. But I think a lot of the people that are in the positions that they are, they're wondering why the employees or the people that they're managing hate them. And it's just because they're only here. It's like the dad is just going, hey, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Never saying what's good. So if you hear the compliments, then it doesn't hurt as much when you need to get some criticism, because obviously, there's times that's how we learn and just we know what's going on and everything. And it's how it's said as well. Instead of, belittling you and sometimes in front of everybody, you can call them into a room and say, hey, by the way, and some of them love doing that. They love to disgrace you in front of people. And so there's a lot of kind of things to be watching out for, but they're simple both sides.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of getting into a habit of doing that as well. And you can get into the habit of doing that even as an individual contributor, before you think about stepping into a manager role. I like to use the 1-to-3 kind of ratio, where for every 3 pieces of positive reinforcement or positive feedback, you give 1 constructive piece of feedback. And what, to your point, often it's just all constructive or all kind of negative. But if there's a little bit more positive than there is negative, it does a couple of things. It really, the feedback lands better because it's not a criticism. It's Carol Dweck famously writes about the mindset. Having a growth mindset. If I give you feedback as a manager with a growth mindset, I'm giving you feedback in a way that I'm really believing is going to help you in the future to become better at what you're doing, or who you are, or whatever. And the person that's receiving the feedback should receive that with a growth mindset as well. It's like, thank you for the feedback, even if it's not what I wanted to hear. Gee, in many respects, Roy, I hear people say, wow, that person gave me that constructive feedback. I wish I had had that constructive feedback, a year ago, because it benefited me so much now that I wouldn't have been doing what I've been doing for the last year, and I'd be in a very, very different place right now. But giving more positive to constructive, when you do that, the constructive feedback is more likely to be listened to because it's in the context of the positive feedback. It's like, generally my manager thinks that I'm doing a great job. Oh, they think that I can maybe do better in this area. Good information to have. Thank you. And let's kind of move on. The old adage of feedback is a gift, it's not necessarily in a box with a pretty bow, but if we take it on as a gift, we grow as humans. as humans. And I think that's what we're all here to do as well.
A lot of Toastmaster speeches, and as an evaluator, you're kind of giving them constructive criticism, but it's all about making them feel good as well. And like some people would do it in such a way that they used to call it the sandwich. They'd say nice, then they'd whack. And I was able to do it in such a way that I didn't do it like that. I was able to tell them what to do, but all the different, and people used to be asking for me to be their evaluator because they actually were becoming way better because of the things that I was spotting. Some people were standing on their legs and things like that. But I never done it. I always done it from a nice place of love. And they knew that,
Yeah.
but I saw some people and they would destroy someone and they wouldn't come back because just the way that they were. And I'd call them out on it. Like I'd call somebody out who evaluated on a thing. Like, cause sometimes there's like a person that evaluates the whole meeting, a general evaluator. And I would call that person out in front of it because they've just destroyed the person who's trying to overcome the fear of public speaking. And I would say, that's not how you do it. And I would tell them, my main aim would to make the person that just got destroyed feel better and realize that the person that just done that was wrong and they need to not do it again. And like, that's the problem as well. Like I would love, sometimes there's nobody that's actually standing over the shoulder knowing that some of the conversations that are going on, and maybe there should be, or some way of kind of what exactly is going on, or the person be able to even jump a level and just kind of let things know what's going on, because they mightn't be doing it out of evil. They just mightn't understand the way the words, how powerful the words are.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And it's funny that you mentioned this because I do have a paragraph about that in the book, but I wonder how many negative or, negatively impactful conversations are actually going on out there in private rooms between managers and their direct reports. And, HR and other organizational resources like that do a great job at managing those things once they're aware of them. But if they're not aware of them, then I worry about the negative impact that some managers might be having on folks. It's kind of scary in a way. That you mentioned the sandwich approach of giving feedback. I've always kind of not really enjoyed. I've always kind of tended to kind of.
You're getting a kiss on one side, a dig in the face, and a kiss on the other side. You know what's coming.
Exactly. It's like, don't do that. It's kind of like, okay, now I'm going to brace myself. They've said something nice, and now I'm waiting for it. Just say something nice. Just say something that you appreciate, about the person. Or if you need to give them negative feedback, give that too. There's a great model out there that your listeners might be interested in Googling. It's through the Center for Creative Leadership. They're known as CCL. And it's the SBI model for giving feedback. And it's an acronym for situation, behavior, and then impact. And the beauty of this model is that it really focuses on the impact that the person's behavior has created. So an example of that might be a situation, hey, this morning, Roy, when we started talking, I really appreciated the way that you were curious about my background and the experience that I bring to the table. That's behavior. The impact of that was that it really made me feel much more comfortable in engaging with your audience. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. So you can use SBI feedback in one sentence. You don't even need to necessarily get a response. You can get one if you want to. But it can be used for positive feedback and also for negative feedback. And it's much more impactful because I find that, to your point before, that people might engage in certain behaviors or behave in certain ways, not necessarily realizing the impact that they're having. And if they realize the impact that they're having, they would never have engaged in that behavior in the first place. So, that's and the situation is obviously important, like this morning or, in yesterday's meeting or, whatever, just to kind of put the person's mind back to when they engaged in that behavior. It's also a very data-driven approach because the situation is data. The behavior is data, as if it's what was verbally said or could have auditorily been heard, or visually seen on a video. It's data. The person can't argue with it. And then the impact is the impact. They can't argue with an impact if the person giving them the feedback is the one that's been impacted. So it can be a really powerful model.
I read a lot of books, and one of the books that I made the most notes was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I read it a few times, and then I was thinking, I don't have time to, and I've so much going on. But so I got the audio book, and listening. And it was only this year I listened again, and I was like, it's so powerful. But my youngest child, he's 11. And I said, you need to listen to this. And he was listening to it and went through the whole lot and enjoyed it. So, even I think if every manager, they should kind of listen to that every year. Like, I mean, I know there's probably a lot of different ones for kind of that particular topic, but there's so much, maybe a modern version of that as well. Like, but with your, like, finally, with your own, you might just kind of tell people kind of the different things that I know we touched on some, but just if there's others that you want to just mention what you're covering in it.
In the book, so I really take the reader through a decision-making process. It's like a decision-making guide, and my hope is that corporations or organizations take on the book and give it out to their direct reports that they are seeing might be interested in future management roles. I use the analogy of Zoe. So Zoe is me in a previous life, but Zoe is making the decision to become a manager or not. And as she reads through each of the chapters, you'll see Zoe's interpretation of how she's viewing her decision. And it takes you through her decision-making process as well. So I've kind of got a third person going on there. There's also activities at the end of each. I call them quests, because I said, game on is management your best career play, because I see, our career as a game, albeit a serious one. It's something that we need to take seriously, that we need to plan for. So each of the chapters are actually quests, and they give the readers a couple of things to think about, just to jot down. It's nothing intensive. But in one of the chapters, I actually have a decision-making guide where they can ask themselves some questions on how much they enjoy engaging in certain elements that are associated with being great managers. And, they'll get their results and then, potentially make an ultimate decision for themselves. I've had some interest from parents as well. Can I give this to my kids who, are interested in maybe becoming a manager in the future? So that's my hope, is that it just raises a little bit of more awareness around what a challenging role being a manager can be, and so that people go into those roles, should they decide to, with their eyes wide open, knowing exactly what's entailed, exactly what's going to be asked of them, exactly aware of the impact that they want to have. And they answer a second question. So the first question I ask them to ask themselves is, what's the impact I want to have as a manager? Because that for me is just the most important thing. And then the second question is why I want to be a manager. Because if they can't answer those two questions, then maybe there's an opportunity for them just to think about what other options might be available to them. Doesn't mean they won't be a manager in the future. It just means that they might weigh their options rather than diving in and maybe finding that the role is not all it's cracked up to be.
Sounds very interesting. And it's launched today, so I wish you super success with it. You might let the listeners know where they can find you.
Oh, sure. They can email me at joanne@theleadershiprecipe.com. Or my website is The Leadership Recipe, so they could find me under either of those.
I'm sure I put a button, the audio in the video, but I'll also put the link for the book as well. So I presume that, you can have it on the website, but sometimes they'll be able to find it on the thing. So thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you. That's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. You can find all my podcasts, the 6 podcasts, scan the QR code or go to roycollin.com. If you're looking for a virtual assistant, go to va.world. Sure to give us a thumbs up and share with your friends, especially this. I think everyone I talk to, they don't like working for their managers, so maybe they'll learn something from this. Until next week, take care.